China might be testing nuclear weapons, Hong Kong is under attack, and how the Communist Party system itself led to the coronavirus cover-up. This is China Uncensored. I'm Chris Chappell. China may be conducting secret nuclear tests. That's according to a new report from the U.S. government. There's an international agreement called the Comprehensive Nuclear Test Ban Treaty. China, the U.S., and 182 other countries have signed it. But China may have violated the treaty by testing nuclear weapons. This Wall Street Journal article shows the Chinese nuclear testing site called Lopner. The U.S. government believes there are nuclear tests going on there that violate the treaty. The accusations originally came from the State Department report, which says China maintained a high level of activity at its Lopner nuclear weapons test site throughout 2019. While it offers no actual proof of nuclear testing, it does raise concerns regarding China's adherence to the zero-yield standard adhered to by the United States, the United Kingdom, and France. Of course, China completely denies it.
China will never accept the accusations made by the U.S. and strongly opposes them.
But here's the funny thing. China could be testing nukes, but not actually violating the Nuclear Test Ban Treaty. Because while China signed the treaty in 1996, they still haven't ratified it. So technically, they're not bound by it. That being said, the U.S. has also signed it, but not ratified it. Both the U.S. and China say they're still abiding by the treaty, even though they don't have to because they didn't ratify it. But they're not alone. In fact, the treaty isn't even legally enforced because not enough nations have ratified it. So there's no point in arguing over a treaty that the U.S. and China technically never agreed to. They can't do anything anyway because not enough countries have technically agreed to it. I mean, the U.S. has enough trouble getting the Chinese Communist Party to make good on the things it has agreed to. And by the way, if you're interested in a look at American issues, we have a whole show dedicated to it. It's called America Uncovered. Subscribe on YouTube, you'll love it. Speaking of secret nuclear testing, North Korea. And a real bomb has just dropped. Kim Jong-un may be dying. According to this CNN report, the North Korean leader is in grave danger after surgery.
U.S. intelligence reporting indicates Kim recently underwent cardiovascular surgery. Some officials saying the intelligence suggests he may be incapacitated.
A source was quoted as saying Kim had been struggling with cardiovascular problems since last August, which worsened after repeated visits to the country's sacred mountain, Mount Paektu.
What? Are you telling me that this young man had heart problems after climbing a mountain? I mean, he is in shape. And that shape is a circle. So what do we know? First, that President Trump would be heartbroken.
Oh, I've had a very good relationship with him. I wouldn't, I can only say this, I wish him well.
Second, the death of Kim Jong-un could be catastrophic for China. The collapse of the Kim regime could send a wave of refugees flooding into China. Bad under any circumstance, but especially bad when there's a deadly pandemic still going around. That's why some experts call it China's worst nightmare. On the other hand, Kim Jong-un might be fine. President Trump, who is well known for reining in exaggerated claims, said this.
Nobody's confirmed that. It was CNN that came out, so when CNN comes out with a report, I don't place too much credence in it.
On top of dealing with North Korea and obviously the deadly CCP virus, the Chinese Communist Party still seems to have time for other activities, like harassing Taiwan with fighter jets, or using ethnic minorities as slaves to restart its economy. And now, attacking the people of Hong Kong. Again. Beijing has once again started pushing so-called national security in response to foreign forces trying to interfere in Hong Kong. Because the only thing that could possibly make Hong Kongers not love the Communist Party is hostile foreign forces. Or maybe it's how the police arrested 15 Hong Kong pro-democracy figures last week. If the Communist Party was hoping everyone would be too distracted by the coronavirus to notice, they were wrong. But that won't stop the Communist Party from continuing to dismantle the one country, two systems policy that is supposed to give Hong Kong autonomy. Also, last week, the China Liaison Office, China's top office in Hong Kong, announced that they aren't restricted by the Basic Law, which is Hong Kong's constitution. So things are not going well for Hong Kong. And stay tuned after the break, because the Chinese regime is doing things that are even more stupid. Welcome back to China Uncensored. I'm Chris Chappell. Dr. Anthony Fauci, one of the leaders of the U.S.'s coronavirus response team, is for some reason questioning China's coronavirus numbers.
I think any of us who have been dealing with this now for the last few months don't feel confident at all that we have all of the data of the originally infected individuals, how long there were people in the circulation, or even now, how many deaths there really are in China. That number is really rather a low number. That number surprises me that that number is so low.
Well, yeah, if you look at the actual numbers they're reporting, it doesn't make sense. But if you look at this face, I mean, how can a face like that lie to you? The Chinese Communist Party has been doing its best to make the world forget that the CCP virus was their fault. Now, Chinese state-run media are floating the theory that maybe the coronavirus didn't come from Wuhan because it may have multiple birthplaces around the globe. Yes, that is a great theory, if you completely ignore science. Fortunately, the rest of the world isn't buying it. Missouri is suing China over the coronavirus. So is Mississippi. Thousands of Americans in Florida have signed a class action lawsuit. China's foreign ministry has called these lawsuits frivolous because a U.S. court has no jurisdiction over the Chinese government. However, this lawsuit, filed with a Chinese court against the U.S. government for China bashing, that's not frivolous, it's totally justified. But it's not just the U.S. suing China. A British think tank says that lawsuits against China over its handling of COVID-19 could total at least $4 trillion from just the G7 countries. And a German tabloid said China is endangering the world and owes reparations of $160 billion. Oh, Germany, you should know better. Don't demand reparations. It never turns out well. So it might surprise you to learn that Americans hold an increasingly negative view of China. Don't worry, the Communist Party knows just what to do. Spread propaganda. U.S. officials say Chinese agents were responsible for spreading panic in the U.S. with fake text messages. They apparently didn't create the fake messages, but did help push them out. The fake messages claimed that Trump was about to lock down the United States under martial law. Obviously, that never happened. Chinese state-run media have supplemented the martial law rumors with their own blatant lies, like that the U.S. military was really behind the coronavirus epidemic, or that Trump is more to blame for the coronavirus than the WHO or China. Oh wait, that wasn't Chinese state-run media, it was Western media. This is Chinese state-run media. Sorry for the confusion. But just in case you thought we'd learned something from the CCP virus, we haven't. A Chinese drone company that's been accused of spying on U.S. citizens has donated drones to American police.
The drones donated by DJI, a Chinese company, have gone to 43 agencies in 22 states, all to help enforce social distancing rules. Failure to comply could lead to a summons or a $1,000 fine.
If these drones save one life, it is clearly worth the activity and the information that the drones are sending.
Yes, what would be the problem with states taking drones from DJI, the same Chinese company that the U.S. government believes is targeting government and private entities to expand its ability to collect and exploit sensitive U.S. data? There's a dangerous virus going around, but it's not the coronavirus, it's stupidity. You know, it's been a while since we talked about the ongoing factional power struggle within the Chinese Communist Party, but there's been an update. A top public security official is now being investigated for serious violations of party discipline. Sun Lijun was a vice minister within China's Ministry of Public Security. That means he was basically in charge of China's police and had a key role in the coronavirus response. But he isn't the only one. As the virus continues to spread in China, 18 officials in northern China have been purged. And for clarity, when Chinese Communist Party officials get punished for doing something bad, keep in mind that they're usually not much worse than the party officials who are carrying out the punishment. I'd call that a power struggle. But despite all of the Communist Party's internal challenges, they're still sending aid to other countries to help with the CCP virus they caused. Sometimes they take impressive photos in front of the piles and piles of aid, like here in Venezuela. Other times, it's a little less impressive. On April 15th, Chinese officials arrived in war-torn Syria to deliver boxes of COVID-19 test kits. And when I say boxes, plural, I mean it. There were 2 boxes. There were more officials there for the photo op than there were boxes of aid. Well, that's awkward. And finally, some good news from China. Citizen journalist Li Zihua, who had disappeared for almost 2 months after being chased by Wuhan police, has reappeared. It turns out he was put in quarantine by the police. He had to give up his electronics, but he was served 3 meals a day, monitored by security guards, and able to watch state broadcaster CCTV's evening newscast. So, no internet or communication with the outside world, and only able to watch Chinese state-run media. That is truly the worst quarantine. After being released from this long quarantine, Li was allowed to go home. This week, he released a video on his YouTube channel in which he thanks the police for taking good care of him. But he also ended the video by quoting a line from a Confucian text about staying true to one's beliefs. The human heart is unpredictable, restless. Its affinity to what is right is small. Be discriminating, be uniform so that you may hold fast. Clearly hoping that people can read between the lines there. 2 other citizen journalists, Chen Qiushi and Fang Bin, are still missing. And coming up after the break, how the Chinese Communist Party's systemic problems made it impossible for them not to cover up the coronavirus. Welcome back to China Uncensored. I'm Chris Chappell. Close to 200,000 people around the world have died from the coronavirus, and it originally spread because the Chinese Communist Party covered it up during the very early stages. That's why I've been calling it the CCP virus. If the CCP had properly handled it better in the first 2 months, a lot of lives would have been saved. But the cover-up was the symptom of a much deeper problem. That is, the entire structure and MO of the Communist Party, from top to bottom, encourages this exact type of cover-up. The problem lies in the one-party system. The Chinese Communist Party tries to be all-powerful. It exercises extreme control over every aspect of its citizens' lives, from what they can see on social media to even how many children they can have. In this type of system, the party takes all the credit when things go well. But it should also bear all the blame when things go badly. With great power comes great responsibility. Except the party is the opposite of Spider-Man, because it wants to have all the power and not take any responsibility, especially when things go wrong. That's why the party is obsessed with stability. The government is constantly talking about stability maintenance, which is coded language for ensuring the party's rule. Since 2011, the Chinese government's internal security budget, which is also known as their stability maintenance budget, has been larger than their military budget. So the Communist Party considers any threat to stability as a threat to their rule. You know what's a threat to stability? A deadly epidemic. So when it came down to it, the Communist Party put stability ahead of helping sick citizens. It's just what they do. For example, the Chinese Communist Party still claims that the 2003 SARS epidemic struck suddenly and they had no time to prepare. In reality, the first cases happened in Guangdong province in late November 2002. Chinese officials didn't inform the World Health Organization about SARS until February 2003. And when it started to spread to other regions of China, they covered that up too. Officially, SARS killed just under 800 people in China. But in reality, it may have been several thousand more than that because of the cover-up. This is Dr. Jiang Yanyong. In April 2003, he wrote a letter exposing the true number of SARS patients in Beijing, which was several times higher than the official number. His letter was publicized by Western media. The party was forced to respond. They fired several Beijing officials, and they put Dr. Jiang under surveillance. And to this day, the Communist Party has still not admitted there was a SARS cover-up. But afterwards, the Chinese Communist Party did create what was supposed to be a fail-safe system to track contagions. It failed. The system they put in place focused on having doctors across China put patient data into a centralized database. This way, central authorities could monitor if there are any new outbreaks. It works great, at least in theory. Last July, 8,000 Chinese health officials even conducted a massive online drill focusing on how to handle an infectious disease outbreak in the style of SARS. The officials raced to test how quickly and effectively they could track, identify, and contain the virus, including by notifying Beijing. It worked in the simulation, but as we've seen over the last few months, it did not work in reality. That's because the Chinese Communist Party's political apparatus makes it impossible for even the best designed system to function properly. After doctors in Wuhan began treating clusters of patients stricken with a mysterious pneumonia in December, the reporting was supposed to have been automatic. Instead, hospitals deferred to local health officials who, over a political aversion to sharing bad news, withheld information about cases from the national reporting system, keeping Beijing in the dark and delaying the response. So, the official system failed. And when doctors tried to share information through unofficial channels, like Dr. Li Wenliang, they were accused of spreading rumors. Police eventually forced Dr. Li to sign this statement admitting to illegal behavior, including publishing untrue discourse on the internet. You see, because of the party's top-down system, any unofficial information is dangerous. Rumors are a threat to stability. Anyone who speaks out is a troublemaker, like Dr. Jiang during SARS or Dr. Li during the CCP virus. 3 weeks after Dr. Li's warning, Wuhan should have looked like this, with authorities diligently preparing for the worst. Instead, it looked like this, as local authorities held a massive potluck banquet for 10,000 families on January 19th, nearly 3 weeks after Dr. Li Wenliang tried to warn people. See, it didn't matter how advanced China's outbreak reporting mechanisms were if no one reports anything. Hospital officials didn't want to get in trouble with local officials. Local officials didn't want to get in trouble with Beijing. The Chinese Communist Party itself can never be wrong, so whenever something goes wrong in China, lower-level officials become the scapegoat, which means they're afraid to do anything. Everything's fine in Wuhan, there's no epidemic here. Of course, when it turns out there is an epidemic, local officials get fired anyway. Another problem with the Communist Party's centralized control is that they can't let anybody else help during a disaster, like civil society groups, churches, or nonprofits, or in other words, its own people. Even the Red Cross Society of China is controlled by the government. It's also notoriously corrupt. The party also doesn't want outside experts to help. So when experts from the U.S. Centers for Disease Control and the World Health Organization offered to help China, they were ignored for weeks. Meanwhile, Chinese state-run media repeatedly published articles in mid-January claiming the virus was preventable and controllable. And then, Chinese authorities shut down the laboratory that first shared the coronavirus genome with the world for political rectification. So this wasn't just a mistake by a few local officials. The Chinese Communist Party itself, from top to bottom, was involved in the cover-up. The Chinese communist system is corrupt. This report by the Associated Press says that top leaders, including Xi Jinping, knew that China was facing a serious pandemic in mid-January, but did not disclose the extent of it to the public for 6 days. In those 6 days, at least 3,000 people got infected, and that was enough to allow the coronavirus to spread out of control. On a government teleconference on January 14th, the head of China's National Health Commission, Ma Xiaowei, said that the epidemic situation is still severe and complex, the most severe challenge since SARS in 2003, and is likely to develop into a major public health event. Now, you might think the implication here is, okay, it's time to warn the public and stop this thing before it spreads further. But instead, in the memo, Ma demanded officials unite around Xi Jinping and made clear that political considerations and social stability were key priorities during the long lead up to China's two biggest political meetings of the year in March. So basically, China's top health official said that political considerations and stability were more important than alerting the public. Not that it helped, since the CCP had to cancel those two big political meetings anyway because of the coronavirus. Ironically, the cancellation was as a direct result of the CCP emphasizing their political considerations. The Chinese communist system rewards cover-ups and punishes truth. This isn't a new thing. When millions of people starved to death during the so-called Great Leap Forward of the 1950s, local officials who lied and told Mao Zedong that everything was great got promoted. Especially the liar who told Mao that hat looks great. In the late 90s, the governor of Henan province, this guy, helped cover up a massive AIDS epidemic. Thousands of farmers got HIV through a botched government blood plasma program. Did he get punished? No, he got promoted. Now he's the second highest ranking member of the Communist Party, where he's in a great position to lie to world health authorities. In Communist China, people who are skilled at lying and covering things up rise through the ranks. People who insist on telling the truth typically don't make it very far. Individuals in China who tell the truth are often flat out punished, like Dr. Li Wenliang, or they're sent to jail, or even forced to make confessions on state-run television. So it's only natural that when a deadly virus spreads, the Communist Party's first reaction is to cover it up. And it's not like they've learned their lesson this time. U.S. intelligence says the Chinese Communist Party is still covering up how many people are dying from the coronavirus. So when some media suggests that China's virus strategy could be a model for the rest of the world, or that it makes China's model look better and better, they must think that the Chinese Communist Party's 90-year track record of lying and covering things up is somehow over. Pro tip, it's not over. Although, according to the Chinese Communist Party, there has never been a cover-up of the coronavirus outbreak. So we're at the point where they're covering up the cover-up. Thanks for watching China Uncensored. I'm Chris Chappell. See you next time.